Hello everybody, thanks for joining me today. I'm Jackie and I create mosaics using sea glass. And today I'm going to show you my sea glass mosaic, 7 days at the beach. So if you've been following me on YouTube, you probably saw a video that I did at the first of the summer where I showed you all the sea glass that I collected over the course of 7 days while I was at my cottage. And my plan is to take that sea glass, all of the sea glass from that one period of time, and use that to create a sea glass mosaic so that I can demonstrate to you that you don't need to have a lifetime's worth of collection of sea glass in order to create a sea glass mosaic. Mind you, I do admittedly have a very extensive sea glass collection. I have been collecting my whole life, and I have a lot of family and friends that will give me their sea glass as well because they know that I make art with it. So usually when I make a sea glass mosaic, I have lots of material to choose from. But you don't need to have lots of material to create a sea glass mosaic. So over the course of 7 days of sea glass hunting along the shore, here's the pile of sea glass that my husband and I found. It's quite a bit. It's more than I would typically find in the course of 7 days, but I think it's more than enough to create a sea glass mosaic. So my challenge is to only use these materials and create a sea glass mosaic from them. So these materials plus some of the other beach treasures that I found. So in the same time period, I found a bunch of pottery. I found some pottery with color on it. I picked up some shells and pebbles, a couple of pieces of petrified wood, and I'm going to choose from these as well. So with all these materials, I'm going to come up with a design. So the first thing that I would need to do is sort the materials. So I have my sea glass and all my beach treasures all sorted here. I have this tray with my bits of pottery. I've got a few pieces of milk glass, some blue, my shells, my little pebbles, all sorts of different things here that I'm going to use. And I put all my big pieces in a separate tray because I know that I'm going to use those for some sort of element in this piece. And then I have my green and my brown and my white. So my challenge is to complete this sea glass mosaic with only using these materials. And I decided I was going to use kind of a small frame, and then I decided to pick out this frame, which is a fairly large antique window, because the piece is all about 7 days along the shore, and so I thought it would be nice to have the shoreline. So a nice big long piece like this will provide me enough room for that. And I know I'm thinking this may not be enough sea glass, but I'm going to give it a try and we'll see if I can make it. So I have all my pieces here, and I thought the first thing I would do is place some of the special pieces. So I have this piece of white that I wanted to put up here for the sun, and then I'm going to arrange white sea glass through the sky, white and aqua through the sky to create some flowing lines from the sun. I had found 2 pieces of petrified wood, so I thought I'd put them down here as fence posts in the foreground. I think those will be kind of cool. And I've got some blues, so I'm just going to set all the blues up in the sky, and then I'll arrange those in later. And a bunch of the pebbles are probably going to go in the foreground here. I might use the pebbles to make a walkway to the beach. And I might use some of these white pottery pieces to make the windows of the cottage. So the first thing I noticed when I started to work on the cottage was that the cottage needed to be white, not brown. So I switched that up, and then I realized the cottage was too small. So I took my pattern off and I redrew it. Sometimes when I decide to make a change in a pattern, what I'll do is I'll just make the change as I go. But for this one in particular, I thought I better take it off and redraw it because I want to make sure the outline of the cottage, that the lines were straight. So the other thing that I'm going to do, I have these 2 pieces of blue pottery with blue printing on them that are really pretty. This one has blue on both sides as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them out front of the cottage and use some of my tiny white triangles to make some flowers coming out of the pots. And then the rest of this area I'm going to fill in brown. except for the walkway. So I think that rock walkway is going to work really well. And I'm using a lot of my big chunky browns to create an outline of the cape. And then what I'll do is I'll fill it in with browns, big browns, because I'm going to be using a lot of small browns for the rest of the sand. So I'm just going to shift the rocks around here a bit, and if I put the smaller ones at the top, and then I'll just have them get bigger as you go down, it'll help give a little bit of perspective. So I used a couple of my bigger green pieces to make a little hedge of trees right here, and in behind the trees you'll see the rest of the cape, and there's a little bit of green here up on the horizon. This is the water, and that'll continue over here on the horizon line, and I'll fill in the rest here with green as well, between here and the top of the cape. And I'm going to add, I think, a few more greens in here somewhere to have a few more green hedges. And I put in my fence posts there. This is a really cool piece of pottery. I decided to put that on just on the bottom of the piece, and then I put in a nutshell sitting on top of that. So I finished my cottage on the cape, and I just wanted to zoom in here to show you a few details. What I wanted to do with the cape was use the bigger pieces of brown. So what I did to fill in the gaps was use smaller pieces or take a piece and stand it on end, because often that helped fill in the gaps. And if you look, I arranged a bunch of the stones to make a walkway from the beach up to the cottage. And there's that awesome piece of pottery that I have there. And this piece right here is a kick-up. I put it at the bottom. I'm going to look through my collection to see if I can find kind of a cool piece just to attach in there. It almost looks like a beach chair. And then I filled in the background water. You can see that on the horizon. So the next thing that I want to do is work on finishing the beach. So I have this line here. It's a really rough line, and I'm just not even really going to stick to the line. I'm just going to create a bit of a beach scene down here. So I have a few of my big browns that I didn't use in the cape that I am going to put down here, kind of as rocks. And I also have a few little shells that I'll probably put in somewhere, because there's always shells down at the beach. And I also have these rocks here that I think are kind of cool. I'd like to use them somehow, and I'm thinking sometimes I do footprints in the sand, and I might just do 3 little footprints here heading down to walk on the beach, and use those as the ball of the feet, and then I'll put toes on them. And I might put this guy in. I was playing with some of the rocks that I found, and sometimes I'll make turtles, and I thought these rocks might make a cool turtle, just to have some things of interest on the beach. So I'll play around with that. And then the rest of it I'm going to be filling in with my little browns. Any of those bigger ones I'm not going to use. But I'm just going to dump a bunch of the little browns that I found on here. And then I'm going to go about filling in the beach with brown. I have way more brown than I'm going to need. We find so many little browns at our beach. I just love it. The other thing that I want to do, I noticed I had these pieces of pottery that look like they could be seagulls. So I might arrange a few of those. I'm just going to set them here for now, a big one, and then some smaller ones. And I might make some seagulls down on the beach, way down, because we have a ton of seagulls down on our shore. So I finished my beach here, and I'm just going to give you a bit of a close-up view. If you look here, you can see the footprints down in the foreground leading down from the cottage. And there's a couple of herons standing at the water's edge, although I think they look a little bit more like dodo birds than herons. But that's what they're intended to be. And here I have a little pile of pottery, just because it's interesting. And at the very bottom, there's a little stone with a hole in it there, and that represents the stone of accord, which is an Irish symbol. We have a bit of a family connection with Ireland, so you can look that up if you're interested. It's fairly interesting. Then I have a turtle on the beach. And I have a little pack of seagulls up at the water's edge. Now the next step is I want to fill in the water with green. So I've just put a few of my tiny greens right along the horizon line. So I'll start with the horizon line and then I'll fill it in. And I know I want to put some bubbles in the water to represent the waves crashing and whatnot. So I have those just laid out there. So there you go. I got all the green filled in the water. And just to give you a bit of a close-up view here, you can see I added a bit of land out on the horizon there. And I used a bunch of these roundish shells to create bubbles in the water. And I had some great pieces to make sailboats out on the water. And if you look close, you can see I've added a number of white pieces of sea glass, small pieces, that will represent the sun reflecting off the water. And if you take note of the horizon line of the green water, it runs from pane to pane in each of the 3 panes of glass to create a nice straight horizon line across the whole piece. And I just added a couple more details. I have a green heart that I added to the door there of the cottage. And I added a couple of pieces down here in this chair at the foreground of the piece. I added a few pieces to represent somebody sitting in the chair, having a nice relaxing day. So I finished my sky for my 7 days along the shore sea glass mosaic. And if I zoom in close here, you can see I have some rays of sea glass coming out from the sun, like rays of the sun. And there's one little seagull underneath the sun there. And over on this side of the sky, you'll see I've got 3 more seagulls. And my piece is complete. So if you remember, I showed you how much sea glass I had collected for 7 days along the shore. And I only worked with that sea glass to complete this mosaic. And now to show you what I have left over, I have a surprising amount still left over. So I have this much brown left. I have a bit of green left. And I have a fair amount of white left too. And if you look in my tray of other treasures, I still have quite a few pieces left there as well. So as you can see, it doesn't take nearly as much sea glass as you would think to make a mosaic this big. So thanks very much for joining me today and seeing how I created 7 days at the beach using only the materials that I collected over the course of 7 days while I was along this shore. And I hope that it encourages you to get out there and find some sea glass and realize that you don't need to have a ton of materials to create a wonderful sea glass mosaic. And I hope this has been really inspiring for you. And until next time, happy sea glass hunting.